Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Happy Friday. I hope you all have a great weekend and enjoy your time with this cooler fall weather. As I told you yesterday, I was going to narrate these PowerPoint slides for you to make sure I'm explaining all of the information clearly as you're writing it down, make sure we're understanding what's going on, and also to reduce the amount of time we need to spend on Monday reviewing our notes from today. So first and foremost, before I change the slide, I do want to bring attention to your homework for the weekend. It is the Roman Empire reading that is in your packet. It is on pages 24 through 26, and you're going to do the questions at the end. So on page 26, you will notice that there are 8 questions. Number 1 is defining and giving the significance of some terms. And 2 through 8 are asking you about the reading. You do not need to answer number 9. I also want to make sure that on page 24, the first page of the reading, that you do the taking notes section. And it is on the left side of the page. It is asking you to make a bulleted chart of the changes in Rome. So you are going to read it. You're going to actively read it. Taking notes separately on the readings is always a great idea, but you definitely want to do that taking notes section. And then question 2 in the back is going to ask you specifically about that. And this reading is going to take us through how Rome and why Rome transitions from a republic to eventually the empire, and who that first emperor is going to be, and what the results of those changes are going to introduce you to the results of some of those changes that we will go into further in class on Monday. So that is your homework for tonight. As you are listening to this presentation, pause it so you can take notes. I'm just going to go straight through, but definitely pause, rewind, do whatever you need to make sure you get all of the information down. So here we go. So yesterday we left off talking about the fact that you are going to have a separation of powers between the social classes, and that some of that is going to shift between 494 and 450 BCE as the plebeians, the lower class, are going to push for more rights from the patricians, the upper class. 2 of the results of that is, 1, they are going to get the creation of the plebeian council, which gives them the ability to make sure the rules are just and for the benefit of all people, not just the patricians. They also are able to appoint 2 tribunes to the assembly and the senate to make sure any laws being passed are again to the benefit of the plebeians, and they have the ability to veto any law that would be harmful. And then the second big thing that they got out of that refusal to fight until there were changes was that the laws were written down on the 12 tables, which were 12 bronze tablets chiseled with the laws in them that were hung in the Roman Forum, the main square, the town center, if you will, where the market occurred, gossip happened, and all of the government buildings were around it. As a result of these changes that take place, eventually the patricians and the plebeians will come to a conclusion about a working constitution, similar to what we see in Athens. And this constitution is going to create new offices of government. And so we're going to see the creation of both a legislative and an executive branch. And that executive is also going to serve as a judicial. So, pardon me, you're not going to have 3 branches of government. You're really going to have 2. But one is going to kind of double duty. And those 3 parts that we see is the creation of the Senate, the Assembly, and then magistrates. Early on, obviously, these are going to be primarily dominated by the patricians, but as the rights for the plebeians expand, you're going to see more inclusion of all parts of society, except for the slave class and women, obviously, within the government. And so when we talk about these positions, understand that just like in Greece, these are for men only. So the first legislative branch that we have is the Senate. There are 300 members in the Senate, all men. They are going to advise the elected officials, and those elected officials are called magistrates. So you'll see that that's the 3rd bullet point down. That's the executive branch, and in a moment we'll look at all the different types of magistrates that there were. But the Senate's purpose was to advise them, to make sure that they were working in conjunction with each other. And many of those magistrates are going to serve in the Senate, so that way they could really work together. The Senate controlled the public finances, which means they controlled the budget for the city-state and eventually then the republic, and they handled foreign relations. So they dealt with trade, they dealt with foreign policy, with like Greece or with the Persian Empire, etc. The Popular Assembly is the other part of the legislative branch. This is going to be for all citizens who obviously are male, and they're going to vote on the laws. They're going to write the laws, they're going to vote on them, and then they're going to elect who those magistrates are going to be. So if you notice, we again have this concept of a separation of powers between the two different houses, if you will, of the legislative branch. So the Senate is going to advise the magistrates, but the Assembly will elect who those people are going to be. And then the magistrates are going to be those who are the executive. They're the ones who are going to put the laws into place. They're the ones who are going to be the face of Rome and the Republic. They put the laws into practice. They uphold them in like a court system, and they will also act as priests. So they will fulfill the roles we traditionally think of as the legislative, like a president or prime minister, but a little bit different. Sorry guys, paused it and for a second to blow my nose and I lost the slide. Anyways, so as I was saying, that even though each of these positions has a lot of power, they do have checks and balances on them. So the Senate is going to be a check on the magistrates, and the magistrates are going to be a check on the Senate and the Assembly. And so the Republic is going to be actually very, very effective and efficient early on, because we see that system of checks and balances between the legislative and the executive branches. That the Senate is going to advise, for example, the magistrates. The Assembly elects the magistrates, and then the magistrates can enforce those laws and then also be a check back. And so it really was a predecessor to what we have in our system today, and the checks and balances that we should be having in place between our executive, our legislative, and our judicial branches. So looking at the Republic then, so if that was the government, so what was it like in the Republic? At the heart of the Republic was the Forum. So when we talked about Greece, we talked about how the center of town was the Acropolis, that temple to the god or goddess, that the market and city life and gossip and politics really revolved around that Acropolis in the center. In Rome, the Forum is going to be the center. It is the town center, it is the town square, and around that center is where the government buildings are going to be. So you're going to have the Senate, you're going to have the Assembly, you're going to have the temples to Jupiter and Saturn and their main gods and goddesses. The Forum is where those laws are going to be posted. It's where the market and trading is going to occur. It's where gossip happens. It really is the center of life in the Republic. Rome itself, as we know, and the Forum is Rome itself is going to be located between 7 hills. The Forum itself is going to be nestled between 2 of those hills, Palatine Hill and Capitoline. Palatine is going to be where the wealthy are going to live. And on the opposite side, Capitoline Hill is going to be where the grandest temples to those Roman gods and goddesses will be located. You would find everybody in the Forum, you'd find the members of the government, you'd find the common lay people, you'd find the slaves there going to do the business for the people they worked for. If there were any announcements being made, such as we're going to war, we're being invaded, the Senate and the Assembly passed these laws, you'd have the town crier. And the town crier, the Roman crier, would be the gentleman who would stand up on a box or podium and would announce the news of the day throughout the day. So prior to newspapers, that was the role of this person. So in the morning, they'd announce any important news of the morning, in the afternoon, and then in the evening, any developments that might have happened over the course of the day. When Julius Caesar returns back to Rome after conquering the Gauls, and there's a big parade and hoopla thrown for him, it's going to happen in the Forum. So that's where celebrations are going to occur as well. It really was the center of life. And this just kind of goes into that. So it was where shopping, gossip happened, and where the public celebrations would take place. Rome is going to obviously expand, as is any civilization. The population is going to continue to grow, and as population grows, you need more land, and you only have so much land when you are a city. And so to expand the size of their city to accommodate their growing population, they're going to be looking at conquering their neighbors. And that's what's going to be that impetus, that motivation for war. In order to expand and conquer your neighbors, you need to have a powerful and successful army. And so while they are definitely militaristic, their life does revolve around the importance of fighting and military and expansion and conquering, and they will be a very well-trained army. It is different than Sparta. So in Sparta, we talked about how from the moment you're born, boys are trained to be warriors. At the age of 7, you go away to school to train to be a warrior. It is going to be different in Rome. You're not going to have that same expectation. In Rome, you had the opportunity to have an occupation and a variety of different occupations. But all Roman men between the ages of 17 and 46 who owned any amount of property were required to serve in the army during times of war. And so while you could have a career, you can have a job, you can engage your life in other pursuits, the expectation was that if Rome did go to war, you were going to war with them. The Roman army is going to be divided into what are called legions, and the legions were the backbone of the army. And at the head of each legion is going to be a centurion. A centurion is a non-commissioned officer. So each legion consisted of 100 men, and at the head of each 100 men would be the centurion. The army itself was very highly disciplined, well-trained, like we talked about. So while they may not start as early as the Spartans did, doesn't mean that they are any less successful or disciplined or trained as a fighting force. They definitely were. If they weren't, they would not have been able to conquer the amount of land and space that they eventually do and have the victories that they do. And one of the first places we're going to see them expand is going to be within Italy itself. So we talk about Rome, and we often think of Rome as this massively large empire, which it was, but it starts off as a small city-state. So the first time we're really going to see Rome start to expand outside of itself and defeat and conquer the people around them is going to be in 265 BCE, where Rome is going to defeat the Etruscans who still live in the surrounding areas. And then in southern Italy, you do have some Greek city-states. And so essentially what Rome is going to do, they're going to head south rather than heading north. They will eventually head north over time. But initially, Rome is going to head south. They're going to defeat the Etruscans and the Greeks in southern Italy. They imposed 2 very strict conditions on their people. 1, you had to provide troops. 2, you could not be engaged in any type of foreign relations, foreign policy with any other nation. So if you were trading with another city-state, if you had any type of dealings with another city-state, that had to stop immediately, because that then became under the control of Rome. So those were the only 2 conditions. Had to provide troops, which of course we can talk about the loyalty level of those troops. And then 2, you could no longer engage in your own economic activity. That came under the control of Rome. But other than that, you can maintain your culture, you can maintain your way of life. Your regular everyday affairs were very much left up to you and not interfered with by the Romans. So now that they've gone south, there's only so far you can go because you reach the end of the peninsula. And so the Romans are going to start to eye that island, that stone that the boot of Italy is kicking, known as Sicily. So once in control of southern Italy, Rome is going to turn their attention to that island off the southern Italian peninsula. But the problem is they were not the first ones there. In Sicily, they're going to come into conflict with a very powerful city-state in northern Africa known as Carthage, who also had recently eyed Sicily as they are looking to expand. So Carthage is looking to expand to Sicily to eventually expand to Italy. Italy is looking to Sicily to expand as well. And so as a result of them both wanting that island, we're going to get this result in the Punic Wars that is going to last for 80 years over a course of 3 different wars. And that is what you looked at last night. So at this point in the presentation, what I'm going to do is take you through some notes on the Punic Wars, just some information to fill into what you did last night on the video. So if you can go ahead and you can put your notebooks away, but you'll need to take out that worksheet on page 23 in your packet that you did last night for homework. And we're just going to discuss and review what you should have found and fill in some additional information. So I'm going to give you a couple minutes to do that and pick up with you in just a moment. Okay, so let's look at the first Punic Wars. The First Punic War is going to break out in 264 BCE between Rome and Carthage, and it is going to take place primarily at sea. So when you look at that location, it should be sea because this is going to be a naval war. Naval warfare has not changed between when we talked about the Persian Wars or the Peloponnesian Wars and the Punic Wars. Even though it's been roughly 200 years at this point since those wars, the tactic is still the same. You're going to maneuver your ship in such a way so that you can ram and sink your enemy. This is something that Carthage is going to be very good at. So if we talked about like how Athens and Sparta, Athens was the navy and Sparta is going to be the infantry, that's what we're going to talk about here. Carthage is definitely the naval fighting force, and Rome is definitely that infantry fighting force. So very much like the Peloponnesian Wars, where there is no like real advantage here, the difference is that very early on, Carthage is going to be the dominant force in these first series of wars because of their stronger naval background. And so Rome is going to have a very hard time getting any type of victory in, getting any type of upper hand. And so they have 2 options. One, you just kind of take it and be done with it and hand Sicily over to Carthage, or you turn the war to your advantage. And in this case, since it is being fought at sea, the Romans would need to find some way to turn this battle to something that is going to be an advantage to them. So they changed the rules of warfare by literally turning a naval battle into a land battle. And they do this by putting on the front of their ships what is going to be called a corvus. That is C-O-R-V-U-S. Again, C-O-R-V-U-S. And a corvus is basically a platform with a large hook on the end of it. So at the end of their ships, they would put this platform or bridge, if you will. They'll put a hook on it. So again, this large, sorry, I got interrupted. You have this large bridge, this large platform with a hook on it. And so what you would do is you would sidle up next to the opposing ship. You're going to drop that hook so it lands on the ship of your enemy, and then your soldiers are able to cross that platform, cross that bridge, and board the other ship. And so you go from a battle of having to ram, which the Romans were not good at, to a battle that's going to be fought on ship. And this is going to turn basically the ship into a mini land battle. And as we know, this is something the Romans are very good at. The Carthaginians were not. And so as a result of this, the Romans are going to be able to win the First Punic War. So these are just some renderings, if you will, of what it would have looked like. So if we look over here, you see this platform style, almost like a ladder. You probably would have had this closer together than what this picture is right now, just to make it easier for your men as they are crossing. But you can see the hook down here has landed in that enemy ship. And so where you would not necessarily need a lot of men on a ship for a naval battle, you will now to be able to fight that land battle. But violence is going to break out soon again. And this is going to happen under the control of a general from Carthage known as Hannibal. Hannibal is notorious for how he is going to get his troops to Rome. So we talked about the First Punic Wars as being wars fought at sea. The Second Punic Wars location is going to be on land, and it's going to be Northern Africa, Southern Europe, and then Rome itself. So essentially what he is going to do is Hannibal is going to lead his troops from Carthage across Northern Africa. They're going to cross into Spain, across the Strait of Gibraltar, between Morocco and Spain. And when he is there, he's going to establish a town called New Spain. So they conquer Spain, they establish this town that they're going to call New Spain. They're going to resupply, regroup, get locals to fight for them. Then from there, in Spain, Hannibal is going to march his army through southern France, across the Alps, and he's going to invade Italy and Rome from the north. And he does this with elephants. So large amount of troops, but the reason this is so famous or gets so much notoriety is because he uses elephants to transport his supplies across northern Africa and southern Europe and through the Alps. It should be noted that when they do go through the Alps and they go through southern France, they are going to face off against another tribal group that the Romans will later fight called the Gauls. And so between fighting the Gauls in southern France and then just trying to get through the Alps and navigating the Alps, Hannibal is going to lose a lot of men. It's not like he's going to have an easy time doing this. And so by the time he gets to northern Italy, his troop numbers have been diminished quite significantly. But once he gets there, he has two options. He could attack Rome directly. That's not the smartest choice, and he knows that because A, Rome is a very well fortified city, and B, his troops have been greatly diminished. And so by being the one to attack, you are putting your troops at the risk. You are opening yourself up because the Romans are going to be more well defended than you are. Option number two is a war of attrition. Think of a war of attrition as an epic staring contest. You wait out your enemy. So what he decides is he is just going to surround Rome and wait them out. And by surrounding Rome, he basically cuts them off from all of their supplies. They can't get any food in. They can't get any goods out to make money. And so it's just a matter of time until Rome eventually is going to give in because they're going to need to feed their people. They're going to run out of food. And so Hannibal feels that this is going to cause the least amount of deaths for his men. And he's right, it is, by just waiting for the Romans to eventually surrender. Here's an image, a drawing of his troops crossing with the elephants, and you see the carriage on top. I could only imagine what this must have looked like at the time. It's going to result in Rome winning and almost completely destroying Carthage. They don't yet, but almost. And so because he defeats Hannibal and he defeats the Carthaginians, Scipio gets to as a result of those the Second Punic Wars, Hannibal being embarrassed, having left his city vulnerable, being responsible for their destruction, he is going to commit suicide. Carthage is going to have their economy shattered. They lost all of their territory to Rome, but still some Romans feared that if they did not put a nail in the coffin, if you will, of the Carthaginians, that the Carthaginians would eventually rise up and come back and attack. It's very similar to what happened with Athens and Persia, except what Athens does is they form the Delian League, a military alliance for personal defense in case Persia were to do that. Rome says, let's go to war, completely destroy and annihilate them, wipe them off the face of the earth, and so there is no possibility for Rome to come back again. And that is going to be led by this man, Cato. And I just want you to take a moment and look at that statue. Like, wow. When we talk about, and I said yesterday that the Etruscans were known for making extremely realistic sculptures, and that the Romans are going to take that from the Etruscans, take a moment and just look at this sculpture. I mean, first of all, it makes me think of like the really grumpy old dude from, was it the Muppets? Like those two old men who are constantly up in the stands heckling. But you can see the frown on his face. He was not a happy man. You can see his bulbous nose, the wrinkles, his hair, even the folds in his neck. I mean, it's one of those statues. This is out of stone. It's out of marble that I look at, and I'm just always constantly amazed by how talented they were, because this was done at the time. So, but I digress. So anyways, Cato says, wipe them off the face of the planet, annihilate them, make it possible so they can come back again. So Carthage, down, out, no economy to speak of. In 149 BCE, Rome is going to declare a third and final series of wars or battles against Carthage. They have no army, they have no navy, they have no defenses, and so Rome is going to win this easily. There's not going to be really any fight here. The entire population is going to be sold into slavery in Rome. Anything of value is carried back to Rome. Anything else is dumped into the sea. They burn Carthage to the ground to make sure that, that they definitely could not come back again. They salt the fields. They salt the town. So not only do they burn it to the ground, but then to make matters worse for the people there, they throw salt into the land. And we know that salt is going to suck the water, the moisture out of the fields, and guaranteeing that nothing can grow there. And if nothing can grow there, then society and civilization cannot survive there. And so that is why Carthage, after this time, is no longer going to exist. Honestly, the Romans had absolutely no reason to do this. Is there a possibility that Carthage could have risen up again at some point and come back? Sure. But really, it was like kicking your enemy when they were down. But this is going to solidify Rome as the dominant force in the Mediterranean. If we look at their empire afterwards, what I want to draw your attention to is that everything added up to this light yellow color. So this is not going to be added until after the Punic Wars. Everything in the brown and in this like goldenrod, this is all going to be added as a result of the Punic Wars. So this is going to be added later under Caesar. This is going to be added about 10 years after Rome defeats Carthage. They're going to start expanding into Greece, and they're going to expand eastward after they conquer the Carthaginians. But we can see really early on, Rome is going to establish themselves as the commanders of the Mediterranean Sea. And then this just shows you the track that Hannibal took. So Hannibal goes across northern Africa, establishes, I'm sorry, I said New Spain, I meant New Carthage, in Spain, goes across southern France and southern Europe and attacks Rome. So this just takes you through that. So hopefully you got through all of the notes. You were able to check anything. If you still have questions, I know the bell's going to ring on me here in a moment, guys, so I apologize. If you still have questions on Monday, please do not hesitate to ask. Make note of what your questions might be to discuss the Punic Wars or any part of the Roman Republic government. Your homework tonight, please make sure to complete that Roman Empire reading on Monday so we can discuss it, understand why Rome switches to an empire, and we can start to look at the empire itself and how it's going to be different from the Republic and what that's going to mean for the people of Rome. Have a great weekend. I'll see you on Monday.